All right, let's just jump right in. When you think of our ancient ancestor Homo erectus, what's the first image that pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably this tall, lean figure striding across the African savanna, right? Well, what if a really strange clue hidden in their very bones tells a completely different story? Today, we're going to unravel a fascinating mystery that might just rewrite a huge chapter of human evolution.
You know, for decades, the story we've told ourselves about Homo erectus is that they were the ultimate endurance runners, perfectly built for a hot, dry life on land. We've pictured them running down prey for miles and miles under the hot sun, with skeletons designed for pure efficiency. It's a really powerful and familiar story.
But here's the twist that changes everything. When scientists took a really close look at the fossils, they found something that just didn't make sense. Their bones weren't light and graceful like a runner should be. No, they were incredibly, almost absurdly heavy. In fact, they look a whole lot more like the bones you'd find in a slow, chubby, water-loving mammal, like a sea cow. So what on earth is going on here? And look, this isn't just some minor little detail we can ignore. It's a major anatomical puzzle. This condition is so unique it actually has its own scientific name, and understanding that name is really the key to cracking this whole case. Okay, the term is pachyosteosclerosis. I know, it's a mouthful, but what it means is actually pretty simple. It just means the bones have this super dense tissue, the outer walls are way thicker than normal, and the space on the inside for marrow is tiny. Think of it like a pipe that's almost solid bone all the way through. They're just seriously heavy. And get this chart shows you just how wild this is. It's plotting skull thickness against body size for a bunch of different primates. You can see all the monkeys, the apes, even us modern humans. We all fall along this pretty predictable line. And then look way up there. You see that single hollow circle? That's Homo erectus. It is a massive outlier, with a skull that's more than twice as thick as it should be for a primate its size. This isn't a small difference, it is a huge leap off the charts. So, of course, scientists have been trying to figure this out for a long time. And over the years, a few standard explanations have popped up. You could call them the usual suspects in this scientific whodunit. So, the main theories you'll hear are that these heavy bones were somehow good for running, or maybe they were like a built-in helmet for fighting off rivals or big prey, or maybe it was just a side effect of living a really tough, physically demanding life. I mean, they all sound kind of plausible at first glance, but do they actually hold up? All right, so it's time to put these theories on the stand. Like any good detective, we're going to check the alibi for each of our suspects and see if their stories check out. First up, endurance running. The problem here is just basic physics. Any animal built for running, think horses, antelopes, or elite human marathoners, they all benefit from light, slender skeletons. Why? Because it takes a ton of energy to lug heavy bones around. Piling on extra skeletal weight is the exact opposite of what you would do to evolve an efficient, long-distance runner. So that alibi is looking pretty shaky. Okay, how about the fighting theory? Maybe that thick skull was like a helmet? Well, the issue is that this kind of super dense bone is actually more brittle. It's less flexible than normal bone. Think about it. A good helmet needs to absorb shock, it needs a little give. This kind of bone structure, it doesn't really have that. It's more likely to crack under a hard impact. And finally, what about just living a tough life? If being super strong and active caused this, you'd think we'd see it in other really powerful primates. But we don't. A chimpanzee, for example, is ridiculously strong, way stronger than us, and they use heavy stone tools, but their bone density is completely normal for a primate. So, one by one, the usual suspects, their alibis just don't hold water. So if it wasn't for running, or fighting, or just heavy lifting on land, what else is there? Well, this is where the story takes a really unexpected turn, one that takes our ancestor off the savanna and puts them somewhere else entirely. Let's try asking a different question. Let's forget about primates for a second. In the entire animal kingdom, what kinds of animals do have these pachyosteosclerotic bones? Where else in nature do we see this strange trait? The answer is pretty mind-blowing, honestly. This trait is a classic signature of slow-moving animals that live in shallow water. We see it in manatees, in hippos, in walruses, and even in the very first whale ancestors that were making their way from land back into the sea. Suddenly, a very clear pattern emerges. These aren't land animals at all. So, why do all these aquatic animals have such heavy bones? It's for something called hydrostatic ballast. Basically, the heavy skeleton acts just like a scuba diver's weight belt. It cancels out the natural buoyancy from the air in your lungs. This lets the animal easily stay underwater or stand on the bottom without having to constantly paddle just to keep from floating up to the surface.
This just blows the whole investigation wide open, right? Could Homo erectus actually have been some kind of waterside specialist? Let's look at the other evidence that starts to build a really compelling case for a life spent wading in the shallows.
This table really drives the point home. It's looking at how hollow the inside of the femur, the thigh bone, is. So check this out. A fast-running antelope, its bone is 68% hollow, super light. Modern humans, we're terrestrial, we're around 47%. But now look at Homo erectus, down at 37%. Their bones were way more solid than ours, putting them much, much closer on this spectrum to an ancient semi-aquatic whale than to a land runner.
And the evidence just keeps piling up. First, some Homo erectus skulls have something called auditory exostoses. These are little bony growths in the ear canal. Today we call it surfer's ear, and you find it in people who spend a ton of time in cold water. Second, there's the brain. That massive brain growth that happened in our genus needed huge amounts of fatty acids, like DHA. And you know where that's found in abundance? Aquatic food webs. And finally, when you actually map out where we find Homo erectus fossils, it's not in the middle of ancient deserts. They're consistently found near what used to be permanent water, coasts, lakes, and rivers.
So when you start lining up all these clues, the bone density, the surfer's ear, the brain food, the fossil locations, that old picture of the savanna runner starts to look really, really shaky. And a brand new image of our ancestor starts to take its place.
So the new picture is this: Homo erectus, the waterside forager, an ancestor who didn't just stop by the river for a drink, but who may have lived there, wading into the shallows to gather things like shellfish, crabs, turtle eggs, all this easy-to-catch, high-quality food. And in that context, their heavy bones make perfect sense. They weren't for running, they were ballast for a semi-aquatic life.
And listen, this isn't just some fringe idea. Marine biologists are really clear on this. This quote from a paper on early whales says it all. Bone ballast like this is an unmistakable hallmark of a life spent in the water. That's a powerful statement that draws a direct line between the weird anatomy of Homo erectus and what we see in other water-loving animals.
So it all leaves us with this one big provocative question. For so long, the story of human origins has been this grand drama set on the open plains. But what if that's only part of the picture? What if the reliable, nutrient-rich resources of the shoreline and the unique challenges of living in and around water played a much bigger role in shaping who we are today? It really seems like the mystery of our heavy-boned ancestor is washing away some old ideas and revealing a much deeper, more watery story of our own past.